Anniversary of the film, they just released the 70mm and the 4K restoration.
In IMAX, right?
In IMAX, yeah. Can you believe that it's been 50 years? Is that kind of crazy?
Yeah, it is kind of crazy.
Yeah.
Absolutely. Yeah.
I feel it in the morning when I wake up.
You look great, by the way. You look a lot better than you looked at the end of the movie.
Listen, that was the oldest version at the end when I'm on the bed reaching up to the mouth. That was a 12-hour makeup.
Wow.
And then when I did 2010, that was 18 years later. It was only 6 hours. But it wasn't as exciting.
Yeah, I'll say.
Listen, I'm going to share something with you, because this is somewhat new. Because, as you can imagine, we're often asked, as the years go by, what is the ultimate meaning of 2000? What does it mean? And I recently, within this last, 2 months ago, read an occurrence of Stanley being interviewed and being asked that same question. And in that particular instance, he said, "How do you explain in words Beethoven's Fifth Symphony?" You can't. Every human being that listens to that piece of music has a different experience because we bring a different persona. And I can prove that because when you hear the music, the Blue Danube, what's the first thing you think of? Well, someone who's never seen Space Odyssey would probably think of Vienna or a river. Someone who's seen our film probably, most likely, will think of space. Which one of those two people is correct? They're both correct, because our film is filled with metaphor. And Stanley said that 2001: A Space Odyssey is a visual symphony. Just like you guys might be interested.
We're getting right into it. I do want to ask, I think that if you ask most actors that have been a part of these films that turned out to be these films that changed everything, at the time they probably didn't have a sense of that, but I can't fathom that you guys didn't have a sense that you were a part of it. Nothing like this had ever been done.
Gary did. I knew I was a part of a very important release that year by MGM. I knew we were going to get a lot of attention, if no other reason than Stanley Kubrick by that time was a world-renowned director, but he did.
There's a kind of a reason, I'll just make it quick. I was a painter as a kid. I won a national poster contest my senior year in high school for all of America. So what am I trying to say to you? It means that I have a good eye. And I can design homes and things like that. That's something I do in life. So, I went to... I got a question. No? Somebody just being a smart ass? That's all right. I'm not good the same guy, so we'll deal. Anyway, I went to see the Stanley Kubrick movie in a little art house called the Music Arts on Wilshire Boulevard. It's now closed down. But the point that I wanted to make is I saw The Killing.
Okay.
And I walked out, and it was because I was a painter, or like an artist. I walked over and looked at the movie poster. I'd only ever done that one time before, and that was for MGM's The Red Shoes of Moya Shear. But I was very young then, and I didn't really know what I was looking at. But I went and looked over, and it said Stanley Kubrick. And anyway, now I'll cut 3 or 4 years go by. I'm going to UCLA. I'm a football player. In September, I'm the only football player in the English and art department. And, well, it was lonely, but... Anyway, I was a big hustler when I was in college. I was a money lender. I was a bad person. And I sold football tickets and had Christmas tree lots, and I drove a Porsche. Now you know who I am. Anyway, the end of the story is, I got the LA Times and I looked at it, and Keir's favorite movie by Kubrick is Paths of Glory. Right, Keir? Yep. Yeah. So I opened up the LA Times, And it says Stanley Kubrick's Path of Glory is opening at the Egyptian in Hollywood. So when you're a football player, you have to go to a training table, both lunch, morning, noon, the first couple weeks of the season. And then after the season's on, you only go at night. So I go to training table and I get my breakfast and I turn and we got these, I call them the Nazis. There's like football coaches are Nazis. And they're all like 8 or 9 of them there. And I said, I had my tray of food and I said, Coach, I can't come to practice today. And 18 Nazi-like eyes bore a hole through me. And my buddies are going, what is he doing now? I was always kind of famous for getting out of stuff. The end of the story is I went downtown, I parked at the Grum's Chinese, I walked across the street, and I saw Paths of Glory 3 times, and then I went back for dinner.
Wow.
That's my Kubrick introduction.
So you knew.
How many people have seen Paths of Glory? I'm curious. Okay. I don't know, for those of you who've seen it, I don't know if you agree with me. I enjoy that movie over and over again the way I enjoy Casablanca for different reasons. I think it's a brilliant film. But for those of you who see, you may not know, maybe you do, you know how it ends with these battle-worn troops who've been through hell and are making fun of this German girl who's singing to them. And they're hooting and hollering and clapping and making fun of her. But gradually, as the scene progresses, one by one, they start to become silent because she has such a sweet manner about her. And you realize that she becomes their sister, their mother, their daughter. And they become silent and some have tears in their eyes. You might not know this, but that actress playing that part is the widow of Stanley Kubrick. They got married and were married the whole time. Yeah. But it really is. For those of you who haven't seen Paths of Glory, check it out. It's one of the great anti-war films with Kirk Douglas in the lead.
Yeah, and in fact, if you haven't seen any of Kubrick's pre-Strangelove career, I mean, he came out of Old Hollywood and made, Old Hollywood movies in the Old Hollywood system, and you should definitely see those. Speaking of Kubrick, we all know him as the legends that are told, this mad genius, endless takes over 200 times the length of the film shot, things like that. But for you guys, what was he like to work for? What was he like on set?
I loved every minute of it.
Yeah.
He was. I had just finished a film 6 months earlier, directed by Otto Preminger. And if you want to know what he was like, I don't know how many have ever seen the film Stalag 17 about a prisoner of war camp during the Second World War. Well, Otto Preminger was the commandant of that prisoner of war camp, and that was Otto on a nice day. I can imagine what he was like the rest of the time. And then going from him to Stanley Kubrick was going from hell to heaven.
Yeah.
He was patient. He never raised his voice. You just knew that you were in the presence of genius.
Are you saying that he could have been one of the football coaches? A little aside to keep us on the weapons.
Yeah. And I mean, what was kind of like when you finally saw the film? Obviously you guys are shooting your parts, and you're seeing the amazing set designs and all of these insane shooting contraptions, but you're not seeing all the other stuff he's shooting necessarily, the Don Man stuff and all that stuff. You're not necessarily on set for that. So when you finally see the film in the theater as it's meant to be seen, what's your...
Oh, it blew my mind. I mean, I don't remember. Did you go to Russia's, Gary?
I saw a lot of Russians.
I didn't see any.
I used to sit with Stanley and drink wine on Friday.
Wow.
We'd eat steak and drink wine and talk. Because I had been a painter and all that.
Yeah.
He kind of allowed me to watch. And I wanted to say this. During the selection process, when they were editing Stanley and Ray Lovejoy, they had to keep sort of you might say a symbiotic relationship of the visual activity of the film. And so a lot of the really absolutely completely brilliant sort of, I don't know, I can't really explain it. Weird, strange, artistic shots
Yeah.
got in the film.
Yeah.
In order to get you to the second half of the movie, Stanley had decided to go kind of pretty straight.
Yeah.
But there's a shot of Keir playing, it never got to the screen, but I told you there's a shot of Keir, and he's playing player piano. He's playing player piano, and as he's going like this, Stanley put the camera right behind him, say maybe like a 40 mil lens. And the depth of field of 40 mil lens is really long. Long lenses mean there's a short depth of field, meaning from here to there, it's all in focus. And the camera is right behind Keir. And I'm telling you, it's the most incredible thing I've ever seen, because like the old player pianos, where you put in the paper player piano and it would come down and play and like roll like the paper, it was kind of designed like that. And all the notes were coming down. All the notes were coming down like this in front of Keir, and he had on headphones. Remember? And he's banging his head, bobbing his head, not like for apples, but he's kind of going like that for the tune. And it's so magnificent. I've never seen anything like it. And I keep looking for it in the final cut. And finally, one day, years after I stayed friendly with Stanley, and I was at his house one day, and I said, there's a lot of great shots you eliminated. And he said, I finally decided that I couldn't do those things in the first half.
Yeah.
Because we were going to blow their minds in the second. So there you go. Just a delayed reaction for you, the audience.
I would tell two stories about Stanley and his eye for exactitude. And the first one has to do with a scene. Well, two stories. I'll tell the first story first. You won't know what I'm talking about, right? But first or second. And this is something that my wife picked out. No one, about 3 or 4 years ago, in one of the screenings, no one had ever noticed what I'm about to describe to you. Although recently, within the last week, someone who went to see one of the brand new 70mm prints did catch it because he heard it. He didn't understand the significance. My wife saw the significance. In the scene where Dr. Floyd is walking on the space station, and he's walking by and he's about to pass a group of Russian scientists, a man and 3 women, right, sitting there. Just before he arrives past them, there is a public address system, but in most of the prints, it's a little muffled. And unless you're looking for it, you probably didn't pay any attention. It's just a general public address system. Then he sits down and so on. Well, my wife caught the fact that in one of the angles, one of the shots, one of the non-speaking Russian women has a blue sweater over the back of her chair. At another angle, there's no blue sweater. Now, what does that mean? The continuity woman had goofed. And obviously, Stanley caught it when he was editing. Now, it's the kind of thing none of us would ever know. I've seen that film so many times that I never caught it. Well, that public address system, I can only paraphrase it, was to the extent of a blue sweater has been found. And urging people to go to the lost and found. So he put that. He wasn't about to let anything like that go, although nobody had ever thought. And this is just a bit of show off on my part, but there was a scene in which I had to communicate with Mission Control regarding this part that may or may not go bad on the ship that both of us go out after. Anyway, it was the dialogue was technological gobbledygook to me. It was like learning a foreign language. It was really hard to memorize. So for weeks, and there was a little dialogue in this film, so it wasn't like we had a lot of dialogue to worry about. For weeks I went over and over and over again, and we shot it. Well, Stanley decided in editing that it was redundant. It was too much like another scene where Mission Control speaks to us. So he cut it, he didn't use it. But to this day, I'll go to my grave, because I will never forget the speech. It went like this. I'll do it quickly. Mission Control, this is X-Ray Delta 1. At 1920 on board Fall Prediction Center, and our 9000 computer showed Alpha Echo 35 unit as possible failure within 48 hours. Request check your in-ship system simulator. Also confirm your approval. Our plan to go EVA and replace Alpha Echo 35 unit prior to failure. Mission Control, this is X-Ray Delta 1, transmission concluded.